Hello, friends. This is Jim Chancellor with the American Veterans Collection. I'm the president and CEO of the American Veterans Collection, which is a not-for-profit that was born in 2010, November 14th of 2010, I believe it was. The American Veterans Collection does a lot of work with veterans that are struggling. Our main mission is to help people with housing and employment in any type of help they might need to right this ship, so to speak. I'm involved in the Veterans Treatment Court in Lake County, Indiana, where we help our veterans through some legal issues. And I'm really happy to be here with you again. I'd really be remiss if I didn't talk about the date, 9/11. September 11th is the day that will live in infamy for the attack on our Twin Towers. On that date, 2,977 people lost their lives, and countless have died since then from that terrible incident. Unfortunately, some was by suicide. Now, the people that were there that day, boots on the ground, let's talk about the first responders, the firemen and the police people that were there, and they ran to the disaster. They didn't run away from it, they ran to it. And I've often wondered about their courage and if they realized what they were doing when they ran towards the towers. In 2023, there were 42 mass shootings in the United States, whether they be terrorist or just mass shootings. 217 people were killed. Let me read you a partial list. Winder, Georgia; Forest Park, Illinois; Dalton, Georgia; Plant City, Florida; New York City; Birmingham, Alabama; Florence, Kentucky; Hudson, Florida; Marion, Iowa; Charlotte, North Carolina, and the list goes on and on. We've lost 527 people so far in 2024. This terrorism and the violence by our children must stop. I remember growing up with my father and listening to him, and Dad taught me not only from my own life, but from his life, his experiences. I leaned on some of his experiences. He was taught right from wrong, and he passed that on to me. And so I grew up with both his experiences and my life experiences, which shaped me. And I often wonder why our veterans couldn't do the same thing, why our veterans couldn't lead by example. Our children, our youth, they don't have to do the mass killings because, unfortunately, as combat veterans, we have done that. They don't have to kill the innocent people. They don't have to do collateral damage because, again, unfortunately, we have done that. You need not fill your life with hatred and violence. You need not take the lives of our children and emotionally cripple the families of them because we have done that. This is not the first time that this is not a brand new idea. This has been brought back a long time ago. There was a man that came before us. His name was Jesus. And he gave his life so that we would be free. Why can't our veterans do the same thing? Why can't we lead by example the same way? Instead, our youth sometimes rule the world, so to speak. And if you think that's not the truth, go to the mall and watch our seniors as they put their head down and won't even look at our youth because they're afraid of them. Talk to our teachers. They will tell you the same thing, that there are students that they can't deal with. They're just afraid of. The drugs and the gangs in the streets have turned our youth into predators, and we all seem to be very much afraid of them. But we can reach them, and we can teach them if they'll listen. But we can't only preach to them. We must be teacher and student. We must talk to them as we listen to them. We must educate them as they educate us. We can't simply tell them what we've done in the past. We can't pound the podium and say, we've done this and we've done that, because they don't care about that. They want to know what's for them. and which way are we going to go forward? So if I could leave you with a short lesson, it would be to let them follow you. Let them follow you down the path that we belong on, that America belongs on, that we're not afraid of our youth. And we're not afraid of, we need to eliminate the terrorism and the bombings and the school shootings. And if our veterans can lead by example, our wartime veterans, we know what collateral damage is. There is no difference between a mass shooting on the street and a firefight in the jungle. There's collateral damage, and we've already done that. So our youth really don't have to. But I'm going to jump around a little bit with you. I mean, that's how I feel about our youth, and I think that we can turn the corner. I think that if we lead by example, and they do choose to follow us, then we can make a difference. Last week I talked about PTSD, and I talked about post-traumatic stress and the moral injuries. The moral injuries of war being those injuries to the soul, and PTSD is fear-based. And I'm a solution-based type of guy. I really don't like to point out problems without saying, okay, here's how we could fix this. And so I'm gonna go down that road a little bit, because on the way home last month, I thought to myself, well, you didn't give them any options. So I believe in symbolic gestures. I believe that there's things that we can do with our veterans that are still in the military. We can talk to them all we want to. We can put them in a room and say, if you're having some mental issues, just raise your hand. And no one will do that. That I experienced that coming home from Vietnam. No one wants to be red flagged. No one wants to be labeled as someone who might have mental issues. But if you educate the entire group, if 300 people come home together and you educate all of them where they don't have to raise their hand, because as soon as they raise their hand, that's where the label comes from. But if you educate all of them together, and then you put that education in their soul, then maybe the first time they get a DUI, or maybe the first time they push their wife up against the wall, or their son, that they'll realize that'll be in their subconscious, and they'll realize that maybe that war still got a hold of them. So that's what I think needs to be done. And I'm going to start a mission next week on doing that, working with Congressman Frank Mervan and some of the National Guard units. I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to make them sign a contract. I'm going to bring in I'm going to offer them hope as far as housing and education, VA benefits, and everything they might need to straighten up their lives. But then I'm going to do a PTSD presentation, and I'm going to bring in other agencies that work with us, the homeless, work with the veterans. And then the following morning, I'm going to have them write an impact statement. And I'm going to have them write that impact statement, pledging themselves to the other 299 people that are there. And I think that when I talked a few minutes ago about a symbolic statement, that signature to those people, I think, carries a great deal of weight. And here's why I believe that. My daughter struggled with drugs and alcohol and she battled it for about 4 years, and then with the help of the Lord, she's back into society and got a wonderful family. But when she was struggling with the drugs and the alcohol, I would try to talk to her, and she would be right up in my face, and she would curse me and yell at me, and I would try to explain to her the right and the wrong, and the way things should happen in her world. Her choices were not good, and I didn't think she heard not one word. I thought she just had a blank. She had the door shut. She was fighting with drugs and alcohol, and she had the door shut, and she didn't hear anything. But then, fast forward 10, 12 years, and I hear her talking to her son, Austin, my grandson, and she's saying the exact same thing that I told her. She's almost quoting me. So I know she heard me. So you give me those 300 people for 2 days, and they'll hear me, and they'll have that education to change their lives. Another example of that symbolic gesture that I talk about is when I was a young man, I started a construction company. And I went to my dad. I was so excited. I went to my dad and he said, "That's great, Jim." He goes, "What are you going to call it?" I said, "Well, I'm going to call it Timberwick Builders." He said, "Timberwick, that's kind of like a tree. You say timber and it falls down and you cut it up. It's like a wick, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "That's pretty catchy." He said, "Are you going to be proud of your work?" Well, I said, "Of course." He said, "Then you name it Chancellor Builders." He said, "You put your name on the side of that truck." And he said, "And remember this, when you stick your hand out and you shake somebody's hand and you make a deal, you're not giving them your word, you're giving them my word." So that always meant something to me, that when I shook someone's hand and we struck a chord or an agreement, that was that was binding to me. That was that was more binding than any kind of written contract, was my word. If you really want to hurt me, if you really want to hurt me, all you have to do is give me something to do. I'll try my best and it doesn't work out, and then you come to me and say, "You know, Jim, I'm really disappointed in you." You know, that would cut to the quick. Now, I want to share a conversation I had with a young man. He just got out of the military and he was just so bubbly happy about things. And he was never deployed. He spent his time here in the States. And so when I was talking to him, I asked him, I said, "Jason, why are you so upbeat about the military? You weren't deployed, you weren't in combat, and a lot of people want to go to combat." And he said, "No, Mr. Chancellor," he goes, "I just had a blast." And I said, "Well, tell me about it." And he said in basic training, he said it wasn't that hard for him. He said he was in pretty good physical shape, and he said, but the guy next to him, his name was Brimer, and he was overweight, and the drill sergeant came up to him and put his face right in the drill sergeant put his face right in Brimer's face and said, "How much do you weigh?" And Brimer goes, "I weigh about 240, drill sergeant." He said, "Yeah, well, when I'm done with you, you're going to weigh about 140. He said, I want you to run around this company saying, 'Rub, dub, clank, clank, I'm a big old baby tank.'" And away he went. And this young guy just started laughing, just telling me the story. And then towards the end of basic training, they were talking about where you're going to go for your advanced individual training. So 11 Bravo was the infantry. So you didn't want to hear that, 11 Bravo. And they were calling off names and they were saying 11 Bravo, you know, Manny, 11 Bravo, Chancellor, 11 Bravo. And then they called his name and said 67 and 20. And he said, I jumped up and I was so excited. And he said, the drill sergeant said, "Sit down, young man. That's a door gunner on a helicopter." And so, he just enjoyed it. He enjoyed serving his country. And he wanted everyone, and he wanted to tell me that story. Now, there's some bad stories out there as well. You know, there's stories from Vietnam, and there's stories from Afghanistan and Kuwait that, that I could share with you. But one I really want to share with you is I interviewed a man from Munster, and he had the numbers on his arm. So he had been in camp. And for the life of me, immediately after that, I could not remember what we talked about. All I could remember was the markings on his arms. And he was as proud as anybody I'd ever met. But the impact of the markings on his arms have stayed with me ever since then. My brother Bill one time he called and asked me if I had seen Saving Private Ryan. And I said, "No, Bill, I really haven't." He goes, "Well, are you avoiding it, Jim?" And I said, "No, not really." He said, "I know what you do, and I think maybe you should see this. I know you work with people with PTSD." He said, "And I think maybe you should see this." And I said, "Okay, I'll watch it." And for whatever reason, I didn't. I just put it off to the side. I never went and rented the movie. Well, the next time he called me and asked me if I had watched it, and I said no again, and he sent me a special edition copy of it. And so one Saturday morning, I plugged it in and I watched the first 30 minutes of it, and it was just unbelievable. It was was unbelievable. And I thought to myself, I hope this is Hollywood. I hope this isn't a true statement. I hope this isn't the way it really was. So I shut my VCR off, and I went to the VFW, and I found some people that were there, and they said, no. He said that first 30 minutes that's exactly the way it was. The rear gate would go down, and the first 5 or 6 rows would be killed immediately, and everyone else was trying to survive. They were trying to use their friends as human shields to get to the beach. They were in water over their head with a 60-pound pack on their back. And so that enlightened me about the difference between my war and the World War II wars, or even Afghanistan and Iraq. I can't imagine being in either one of those wars either. So the American Veterans Collection also works with needy families during the Thanksgiving and Christmas season. So I'm proud to say that we work with, our goal is 50 families, but we fell short last year, and we only serviced, I think, 42 families. And what we do is we work with the different agencies in the area who might have names and phone numbers of veterans and veteran families that might be struggling. And then we contact them, and we work with Strack Van Tills, and we pay them. I think Lisa charged $100 last year, and she probably donated another $200 worth of food. So these veterans for Thanksgiving had, food for a week before, and the Thanksgiving meal, and probably a week after. And then when we got there, when we delivered the baskets, we gathered the genders and the sizes of everyone in the family, and then we asked for a need list and a want list. So if there's a little girl on that list, then we take some food to the family, and there's a small child on that list that needs boots and coats and things for winter, we certainly would get that. But we'll also get that Barbie doll as well. And then we work with a pastor in Highland, Indiana, and we utilize one of his outbuildings, and we have a great big oversized Christmas chair, and we bring a Santa Claus in, and he works with the kids as they come in. The Munster Junior Women's from Munster, Indiana, does all the shopping for us. Shout out to Diane Kowalski for that. I don't know how we could do it without her. So let me talk a minute about the Veterans Treatment Court. I call it an opportunity court because there's more opportunity for people in the court than out of the court. I believe this. If there's a guy out there busting his butt, working 40 hours a week, not able to get sick, not able to break his arm, not able to do anything other than go to work back and forth, he doesn't know the opportunities that's available to him. If he's in the court system, whether it be lucky or unlucky, with a DUI or another charge, the court system, Judge Cantrell offers them everything from housing. If they're on the street, we can house people. If they want to complete their education, we can offer them an educational opportunity. We food and clothing, transportation, just about everything that they might need to rectify the problems in their lives, to stand up tall again. But they have to want to do this. We have every opportunity, but the young man that doesn't know of these opportunities, they can't use them. The kids that are in the program, they're the ones that have to use the program. Now, in the past, I've worked with, he was at the North Township trustee, Frank Mervan. He's now Congressman Mervan. But we worked on a homeless program, and it's still in place. What we try to do is we try to bring our homeless veterans in. They're probably the toughest nut I've ever tried to crack. They don't trust anybody. They're on the streets, and a lot of times they don't want help. But the program that Congressman Mervan and I put together was we try to find someone that is struggling, and we take them, we put them in a home or a transitional house, and we give them everything they need. We supply food for them. We give them about 72 hours to detox. So they need to know that we care about them, or else it'll never work. if they know we care about them, then they'll work with us. So we let them sit for about 72 hours, and then we start to do some detox on them, or excuse me, we do some intake on them. I'll sit and talk to them and ask them, what direction they want to go, and how we can help with VA claims. And then I'll say, be ready to go to work tomorrow morning, and we'll pick you up about 7 o'clock. And he says, well, I can't go to work, I don't have a job. And my response is, oh yeah, you do. We have day employers, and we're going to work. You're going to work day employers. And their next response is, I don't have a car, and we have dial-a-ride buses that pick them up and take them. And working with many employment specialists, and they all agree that employment is so good for the psyche. It gives you responsibility. It makes you feel good about taking care of yourself and your family. So if they want to change their lives, we can help them change their lives, whether it be through, the second time I talk to them or the third time I talk to them, I'll ask them what direction they want to go. Do you want to go back to school? Or we have a great relationship with Ivy Tech that has a 24-month fast track degree for a nurse's aide, I believe it's called, or a nurse's assistant. So if they want to go to college, we can do that. They can use their GI Bill to help pay room and board and books and things like that. If it's someone like myself who wasn't really college material, I went right into the construction trade, and we have relationships with them as well. They have apprenticeship programs for, the IBEW, the electricians and the iron workers. They all have programs for veterans. And then while we're in that process of ironing out taking all the knots out of those ropes, I found out that they need to have a clean record. They can't have any baggage. So I went right to the superintendent I was talking to, and I said, well, what is this? I mean, if he's squeaky clean, he doesn't need any help. But if he needs help, then we got to be able to help him. And he said, well, Jim, the two things that most people fail are the drug test and the math test. And I said, well, if it's that hard, then how do you expect people to get over the hurdle? He said, we offer classes on how to pass the math test. He said, if they want to make a difference in their lives, we can help them. They still have to pass the drug test. So we've placed people in employment. We've worked with them as far as housing. We've done what we can. Now it's up to them to reach back out to us.